Geopolitics and Empire is joined by filmmaker, freedom coach, and host of the EyesWideOpen podcast, Laurence Easeman of LaurenceEaseman.com. I was on his program not too long ago, and now I'm welcoming you to Geopolitics and Empire. Laurence, what's going on?
Hey, Havoye, how you doing? Great to be on your fantastic podcast. I'm a fan, I'm a viewer, I'm a subscriber. So yeah, it's a great honor to be, your guest. Yeah, thanks for coming on mine.
Well, I very much enjoy your work and like connecting with like-minded people, and you've got an interesting background, and we're sort of on the same frequency when it comes to the different topics that you and I both cover, whether it's geopolitics, empire, globalism, all this sort of stuff. And so, but maybe just to start, if you want to tell us briefly, who is Laurence Easeman or Laws?
I'm Laurence, or Laws. Yeah. I've got a podcast called Eyes Wide Open, which you can see on YouTube and Twitter and Rumble. And I like to develop ideas of truth and justice and freedom, even go and try and deal with aesthetics and beauty if we can. And we do that through engaging conversations with a wide variety of red-pilled guests, obviously like your good self. I also offer other compelling content for truth seekers of all stripes, such as monologues, live streams, historical content that covers wide-ranging subjects from geopolitics to esoteric and occulted knowledge to topical news and affairs. And I also throw in a little bit of English humor where and when I can. But the main objective is to try and uncover what's really going on and offer solutions, because as we talked about in our podcast, is that especially in our game, we deal with a lot of black-pilled information that can be depressing, demoralizing. So that's not my intent. That's not my goal. It's to try and provide solutions and offer, the insights that my guests and what we do on the show can help people who are on this kind of freedom path and they're trying to extract themselves from this dystopian hellscape that's being presented to us at the moment.
Indeed, this dystopian hellscape. And I sort of start out by asking my guests. I'm mostly like a big picture dude, like, what's going on with this or that issue or topic, and then maybe to ask you big picture, the New World Order. A lot of us were reading about this many decades ago as kids, as teenagers, as 20-somethings, 30-somethings, and world government, the Great Reset, globalists, the eugenicists, elite. When you put on your conspiracy goggles, what do you see? What is going on from your vantage point and years of research?
For me, all roads lead to the bank. It appears to me from my research over the last 20 years is that it's the money power that is running the show. It's the people who are printing the money, that are charging the interest, that are manipulating the interest rates, that are, magically inflating the currency, that are causing all of the problems that we have. And everything is a trickle down from there, because there is only one policy, and that's economic policy. Because, he who controls the gold controls it all. And that's all my research eventually leads to that conclusion. Specifically, one of the topics that I kind of revisit regularly is usury, and its interest on money that's created out of thin air. And I think we deal with a lot of distractions in our general view of society and culture and civilization, because they don't really want us looking in the place where it all flows from. And I think it was best highlighted this week how the banks are now feeling confident enough that they're able to bare their teeth and show us how much power that they actually have, and that they're almost supranational. They sit above governments and are outside the purview of Parliament and even the Crown. Because we've seen, the latest scandal with Nigel Farage. Whatever you think of Farage, I'm not massively a fan. Some things he's done that I respect, and other things obviously not. But the fact that he's come out and said the banks have cancelled him, it's cause for alarm for everybody, isn't it? Because that's making an example of a high profile figure to say, look, we can get him, we can get you easy too. And it's also been a brilliant, education watching all of the drones and the NPCs coming out against Farage on the side of the banks. I mean, who the hell supports the banks? And they've got no shame in doing it. But also equally instructive is the Bank of England today announced that they believe that all genders can get pregnant. The Bank of England. Why are the Bank of England involving themselves in social policy? Well, why do they think they need to let the public know that the Bank of England believe that all genders can get pregnant? And then you had the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, come out and said he doesn't think banks should restrict people's access to the banking facility for issues of free speech. He didn't order them, right? Because he can't. Because ultimately it comes from the Bank of England. The Bank of England are controlled by the Charter of the Bank of England, which, if you look into it, is an incredible historical document that puts the bank outside of the control of Parliament and outside the control of the Crown. So when it comes down to it, that's where I think all of our problems are rooted to. And that's where we should definitely focus our attentions when we see all of these distractions that appear. And I think that's the one objective, that if we could resolve usury, then I think we would see an alleviation of tons and tons of our problems. In America, you had the version 2 of the Bank of England with the Federal Reserve. And that's what's been pumping out dollars like a drunken sailor for the last 100 years. So yeah, that's my take.
Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen. Some of the most successful empires were those that offered people a reason to come, often lower taxes and the prospect of citizenship. In ancient times, empires would say foreigners can become one of us and prosper through business and trade. Throughout history, people have gravitated to jurisdictions that have given them the best conditions to do business. So if you run a business, you should consider Nomad capitalists, because they help entrepreneurs and investors relocate to parts of the world where they can keep more of their wealth. They literally wrote the book on it, the best-selling Nomad Capitalist. Find it on Amazon. If you're an entrepreneur or investor and believe you're paying too much in tax, or if you'd like to get a second passport or a third passport like I have, to expand your options and not have to be reliant on one government, there are legal ways to do this. Nomad Capitalist has been assisting over 1,000 clients for the last 10 years. You can check out their 2,000 plus educational YouTube videos and nearly 2,000 blogs. Just go to nomadcapitalist.com, learn how they can help you legally reduce your tax bill, expand your options globally, and navigate the algorithm ghetto. And this is fascism, kind of, as you say, and it's interesting that the left is supporting this. I call it. They call themselves liberals. And I call them, these liberals that you and I are talking about, specifically the NPC liberal class, they are what I would call fascist, totalitarian, humanist, liberal globalists. One of my guests on TNT, Professor Keith Preston, he points that out. This is totalitarian, humanist, liberal globalism. And your tweet, I like your tweet. You tweeted, quote, "All the retarded lefties coming out on the side of the banks is the best thing to come out of the situation," like that time when they all wore masks. And I posted Nigel's clip on my LinkedIn, and it went viral. 10,000 views on my LinkedIn.
Wow.
I got a whole bunch of people wanting to befriend me. But I saw some of these comments where these people on the left were happy to see their ideological fellow citizen adversaries debanked, put into the algorithm ghetto, basically put into the Jewish ghetto, because I'm using that term for my guest, Jewish historian Edwin Black, who's comparing the algorithm ghetto to the Nazi Jewish ghettos. And now you've got liberals saying, yeah, put Nigel in the Jewish ghetto, which is insane. Like, I don't wish ill on any of my ideological adversaries in this regard, but they totally missed the forest for the trees. This is about a global dystopia, which they will also be in. And then, Nigel tweeted that this priest in the UK, just like soon after he got debanked, some priest who complained about trans ideology got debanked. And then, where do you think that's going to stop? Even these lefties, maybe, who don't pay enough carbon emissions might get debanked. Or whatever. So
I don't even think they're aware of their ideological position. I think a lot of the time they just wait for their marching orders, and the marching orders are inserted into their consciousness, and then they just play out the program. I mean, because surely they must have some self-awareness about what it is that they're saying. Because, socialism, if you go back to where the left, originated, it's meant to be an opposition. It's meant to be an economic opposition to capitalism and banking, but here they are now 150 years later lining up on the side of the banks just because they have this personal enmity, this hatred that has been inserted into them, this rage that they feel as if they, just want to see their opponents crushed completely regardless of the social and economic disaster that's going to impose. Because ultimately what this with Nigel Farage is the thin end of the wedge to social credit. Now, if your opinion goes against the narrative of the banks, not even the government, of the banks, then they will restrict your access to commerce. And the more digital commerce becomes, the more access to banking we need. It should be a fundamental legal right that, is above and beyond the control of some private financial entity. It should be by the people. Who the hell do these banks think they are, especially if they have a monopoly over our economy, and which is what they have. And this is the major problem that people need to address consistently, but we kind of get lost and we get distracted, and the people who are running these financial empires are masters of manipulation and fear. They know how to misdirect everybody away from what the real target is. But yeah, it's incredible to see. I'm no longer surprised anymore after the sequence of current things that we've seen online and how these people will literally wait for their next program. And you can almost predict it. You can predict what their position is going to be before it actually happens, because we've just seen it now with such consistency, is how when the system is ready to install and deploy the new narrative, they have a willing and vast number of drone clone NPCs waiting for their next instruction.
Yeah, and I don't use that term fascism lightly, though, because I think you were kind of alluding to, because now you've got the private institutions, right? Banks and corporations, and then you've got the government, and then they're working together, basically, for the social credit. So this is fascism, where they are now working together, sharing information and agreeing on the same policy then, where, like my example, where the Department of Homeland Security, government, works with PayPal, private, to debank me, deplatform me. That's fascism. And then that's what I was thinking when some of these lefties on the LinkedIn were cheering Farage's debanking, because again, they believe he got Russian money, right? That's that thing. And I'm like, well, I didn't do anything. What about me? But anyways, but we're seeing every day in the news this advance of the cashless system. I read some Spanish paper was talking about how Brussels they want to gradually eliminate cash to bring in the digital euro for absolute control. I'm biometric update. I follow daily, and you've got like Somalia whipping out QR code. They actually say in this mainstream paper, Africa World or something, Somalia just deployed a QR code payment system nationwide, and their end goal is cashless system. They just copied Kenya, which deployed that, on and on. And so, well, what are your thoughts on this road towards this digital dystopia?
Well, I'm praying for a miracle. I'm praying for a miracle, because that's what we need right now. It appears some divine intervention to stop this never-ending march of the dark, malevolent forces that are behind these crazy decisions. This is undoubtedly what's happening. They're moving towards a cashless society because they want to control all aspects of our lives. And, when we deal in cash, the bank is out the picture, or the government are out the picture. It's just private between the parties, isn't it? And they have no interest in that exchange, in that trade. And that's what they wanted to remove, because what we're seeing, again with Nigel Farage, is that if you say something that they disapprove of, you're getting switched off. Now, will they be able to do it? I'm not sure that actually, in reality, that the technology is as sophisticated as they like us to believe. I don't think the AI really is artificial intelligence. I think it's just some clever software, and I don't think that they will achieve those goals in reality. There is some argument that it could be useful if it was in the right hands. It could be technology that we could all benefit from, but I don't have much faith in those people who are operating it. And I think what we're seeing in France, France could be a kind of a smokescreen in order to bring in more extreme government measures. And would that be an opportunity for them to impose the cashless society, the 15-minute cities, because that's where they were, first created, wasn't it? First invented. The 15-minute city was invented in Paris. So I hope it doesn't happen. I think that there will always be cash. I don't think that they will ever truly be able to take cash from society, because you go to prison, there's no cash in prison. But what do they use? They use cigarettes. They use playing cards. They use drugs, whatever they can get their hands on that people want. So there'll always be some medium of exchange, in my view, whether it's, on the black market or not. I don't think they'll truly be able to eradicate it. But I think what we'll see if it continues is two parallel systems. There'll be one system, which is you have to be plugged in to that system, which may end up with things like brain chips and stuff. You won't even be able to enter that world, that kind of dystopian hellscape. Or there'll be the people, the dissidents who have broke off, like Nigel Farage, because he can't get a bank anymore. We're going to be in the same outpost as him. So yeah, it's all pretty dark stuff. It seems to me as if they're racing towards a date in time, which is 2030. They have this numerology obsession, don't they, with these dates? So maybe if they're unable to achieve the diabolical goals and they're unable to impose this cashless digital system within that time, then it might all fail and collapse. But I think we've got to keep pushing back, despite the overwhelming odds, or it appears that there's overwhelming odds against us. We've got to keep pushing back. We've got to keep resisting, and hopefully we'll get the breakthrough that we so rightly deserve.
I mean, that's the fun part for us, pushing back. It's our duty, even if we are going to end up in the digital gulag, we have to push back against the Goliath. And you mentioned France, and as you said, I've been following a number of analysts, and I totally agree. Michael O'Fallon, who I'm a fan of Sovereign Nations, and many others pointing out that they create the pretext for the solution that they're looking for, and so they kind of let this France thing happen, collapse, and then they want to bring in martial law. Someone shared a recent clip of a woman in Russia, so a Russian lady, saying that the whole Wagner Prigozhin, mutiny was a Russian false flag to bring in martial law. And that's been one of my initial plausible scenarios. And you see this trend now across the board. France and Russia and US, Western countries, Eastern countries, all bringing in martial law. And I'm not with the people who would worship Putin and Eurasia and all this stuff. And I was going to get your thoughts where, we get to the Great Reset and people talk about the multipolar world saving us, but you just had Davos in China Davos. And then I found this crazy article. They're having, in a couple days, this big conference in China. And it's basically the three key themes for 20 years that I've been banging on about. They say these three topics cover the core challenges of global change, in my opinion, technocratic world government. So it's called the Thematic Forum of Global Digital Economy Conference, Building Smart Cities in the Changing World. And the three themes are, so this is in China, right? You have the China Davos, and then this is a separate one in China. Smart city and regional integration. So that's like EU. International relations and regional integration. And then international finance, global governance, and regional integration. Those are for me the top things. The global financial, as you mentioned, the digital hellscape, as they, the smart city aspect, and then the regional integration, which is the foundation for the world government. EU, North American Union, South American Union. And so, what are your thoughts when it comes to this East-West? I mean, if you want thoughts on, the geopolitical World War III, Ukraine. So I think there is elite collaboration at all levels, but I don't also dismiss that there at some point can come a time where things just explode. It's like the mafias are working together, but at one point one mafia might decide to go against the other. What's your take here?
It's difficult to know really what's going on, so we can at best speculate. But I read something interesting that Macron was making overtures to join BRICS and was invited to attend a meeting in BRICS. And I know that the Russians do have deep ties and deep alliances with the French, especially because there is an old, enmity between Russians, the English, and the French and the English. So it was kind of my enemy's enemy is my friend. There is an old alliance between the French and the Russians that goes back a long, long time. And I was reading that Macron was trying to make moves to join BRICS, or at least entertain the offer from BRICS. And he mentioned something recently, didn't he, in the news, where he was talking about Europe needs to wean itself off from NATO or American hegemony and start to stand up for itself, which was a surprising comment coming from Macron, the globalist, the former banker for Rothschild, literally, who appears just to be a controlled puppet. So it was kind of, well, what's going on there? Why would he speak out against quite clearly what the narrative is? And so I found that was an interesting comment. And then someone wrote is that the riots were attempt to terrorize Macron back into the fold, to scare him away from going to BRICS. We've got control of the terrorist cells within France, all of the ISIS, Syrian, American mercenaries, CIA mercenaries that were masquerading as Islamic fundamentalists, were getting paid for by American dollars. A lot of those cells went into Western Europe and, just waiting to be activated. And if you saw some of the videos of the French, riots is the wrong word. I don't kind of know what quite to call it at the moment. French Revolution 2, maybe. If you see some of those videos, I mean, some of those guys are really organized. They know how to fire the guns. They know how to, do what they were doing. They weren't just, kids causing distress. Therefore, it's organized. If it's organized, who is it organized by and what's the purpose? So I thought that was a good take on the situation. It's like maybe Macron was being scared back into his box to stop him from aligning with BRICS, because we saw that, didn't we, with, Gaddafi when he wanted to break off the petrodollar. We saw it with Saddam when he wanted to break off the petrodollar. The Americans just went straight in to crush them. So I think there's more going on than meets the eye. And then what we saw in Russia, which could have either have been a genuine coup or a mutiny from within, from Prigozhin, and what appears to be Sudakovin, the top military general, appears to have been arrested. So he was, at one point, he was the leader of the military within Ukraine. He was running the war. So that's as high level in the Russian military as you can get. And apparently, I've read it in a few sources, hasn't been confirmed, he's been arrested. If he's been arrested, then that implies that that coup was real at some level. Either Prigozhin was working with Sudakovin and that was how it was being orchestrated. That's why he knew how to march on Moscow, but he lost his nerve. And Sudakovin did a video, which he looked a bit drunk, and he had his hand on a machine gun and he was telling Prigozhin to stop and, don't go any further. Or Prigozhin, due to his close relationship with Putin, because he used to be Putin's chef. He used to serve Putin his food, probably to make sure it wasn't poisoned. I don't know. But this guy's gone on from humble beginnings to becoming a multi-billionaire and having a very close relationship with Vladimir Putin. Could have been a false flag by the Russians in order to flush out people like Sudakovin, who was the Russian general at the top of the chain, and there's a purge. So I'd like to think that at some level there is some independence between the East and the West. I struggle to go with that. They're all working together. I think at some level there will be some compliance and some cooperation, yeah. But at the same time, I genuinely think that this is an attempt by NATO, the American empire, the rump of the British Empire, to finish once and for all the Russian empire, because the great game between the British Empire and the Russian Empire goes back 350 years or more. It's the old enemy. And when the British military supremacy faded and Americans took over, it seemed that they took over the great game too, which was to continue this opposition to Russia in the East. Because if you look into what some of the plans that NATO has for Russia, it's balkanization. It's the complete dismemberment of Russia as a nation, as a federation. And they want to split it up into 1 million pieces so it is no longer a threat to the West, or so they can just rape the resources of one of the most resource-rich nations on earth. That makes more sense to me. That makes more sense that it's part of a global conquest in order to remove one of the oldest foes or the oldest obstacles for global dominance that's in the way. But then you have China as well, because China are now allying with Russia, which is an uneasy alliance because they've always had a lot of enmity themselves throughout the centuries. So it's an unusual alliance. So I like to think that there is some genuine opposition, that there is some genuine resistance to this global financial hegemony that is being, it's the military angle is being run from America, there's no doubt about it, but I think the financial angle is still being run from London. So, because if you see, it's the British government have the most hatred towards Russia at the moment. That they're the ones who are running the show. The Americans seem to be going along for the ride, but it's the British government that have open hatred of what's going on in Russia. So that's kind of my take at the moment. It changes as new information comes in because it's so difficult to have a firm grip on the geopolitical nature of this very, very interesting struggle at the top of the game.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I kind of view it as different factions of global elites, like you mentioned, that Western occult oligarchy, as some people call it, the Anglosphere, Anglo-American sphere, and then the Russia-Eurasia sphere, and then the Chinese. I like Daniel Estulin. His view is interesting. He calls them different projects. I think he calls the Western one. You've got like the he's got these different names. You've got these mystical Chinese nationalist elites, and they've been around for hundreds of years, and then the Russians, and then the Wests. But I would agree with you. My point is, where I see both things happening at the same time, these two contradictions, is which I'm trying to decipher. Where you see genuine geopolitical nationalist, military conflict, as you just outlined, between all these different parties. That's genuine. But then you also see them participating with globalism. So it's just like two contradictions, and I'm just trying to square. We're all trying to square those circles and see which one. It's for now, as you said, we got to wait for more information and for events to develop just to kind of figure that out.
I think technology has made globalism inevitable to some degree because we can travel around the world very quickly nowadays. It's cheap. So the movement of people is far bigger than it's ever been in history. So that's the first issue that has, helped globalism achieve its goals as the dominant ideology at the moment. But also it's the fact that money can move so quickly around the world these days too. It can move around in a flash. And then you've got the internet. So, we can communicate now. We look at us, communicating from in 1080p. We're communicating in beautiful 1080p. You're in Mexico. I'm in the UK, and it's in a flash. So those nationalist borders are not as clearly defined as they have been in the past, and therefore business is operating on a global level. It's like, you'd run a YouTube channel, and you've potentially got a customer base of billions, whereas previously maybe only a small amount of people had access to global markets. Now everybody's got access to global markets due to the ease that we can do business internationally. So I think there is some inevitability to like globalism on a business level. But how that merges between nationalism in terms of who we are and what our identity is based upon our national borders, that's where it's all being a little bit, unclear at the moment. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the conflict.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Again, a lot of things that a few things you've already mentioned that kind of a new ways for me of thinking regarding some of these issues. You mentioned some of the stuff that you've been touching on regarding your podcast. You mentioned occult and esoteric and other things, right? Being sovereign and free. We've kind of touched on some of my obsessions. What's another issue that you're passionate about, that you're freaked out about, that you like to cover often?
I like the idea of sovereignty. It's a difficult concept to define other than we're all born sovereign. We're all born sovereign and we give our sovereignty away step by step. And I think one of the biggest issues we face today is that people, because they've so willingly handed over their sovereignty from birth, is that they've lost their ability to stand up for themselves and to think critically about what's going on in the world. Because if you hand over all of your sovereignty, then you're no better than a slave. And if you're a slave, then you're going to go along with whatever the state or the authority figure tells you to do, because you've lost the ability to think critically and be able to exercise your own sovereignty from within. I think there's a spiritual message within that too. I think there is an idea of our soul is rooted to our sovereign identity. And the more we hand it over, the less we are human. Right? And I think we've kind of experienced that during COVID. It was so disappointing to see how many people just folded at the first opportunity of tyranny. And, the first wave was to find out who were the ones that would just do it. The second wave was trying to flush out, a little bit more of the resistance, and they folded. And then the third wave was trying to find out the next rump down, and then they got to us. They couldn't shake us off by any means necessary. And I think there's a lot of people who are part of the resistance, who are naturally aware of their own personal power and their own sovereignty, and something that they can never take away from me ever. No matter what they do to me, I'll die sovereign. And I don't mean that as like I'm a king or anything like that. I just mean I'm in control of my own destiny, and I'll only agree to do things if I believe they're just, right, and true. And I'm not going to be forced into anything I don't want to do, and I'll take the consequences as they come if I'm faced with them. But I think that's one of the greatest things that people can learn from this freedom journey. And that's ultimately what red pill means, is that, you are conscious of who you are aware of your own personal power, because we are really powerful on an individual level when we make a stand. One man can, change the whole game, as we saw with Jesus Christ, but yeah, it's that for me is one of the main things I try to impart upon people. Is over the years that I've been doing this, I've been challenging, the state's presumed authority over me for over 10 years. And I've had, lots and lots of success, and I win regularly. I've won a lot of court cases, and I've helped a lot of people who have faced bullies, basically authoritarian bullies. And because we are still largely protected in England with our common law system, which is a gift to the world, and one of the reasons why England is being targeted for destruction, because they can't kick us out, so they're trying to breed us out. And, they don't want that English common law system to be shared too far with too many people, because our rights are so deeply ingrained into the bedrock of the country that it's very difficult to get rid of them. And once people understand the nature of who we are in our existence, then it gives us even more personal power. And with that personal power, you become more influential and you can shape, your reality, and you become in control of your own destiny. So that's one of the things that I like to try and share with other people. And hopefully, more and more people become more sovereign. It's not a switch that you just switch on and off. It's a process. And I'm still learning myself, and I'm still picking up stuff all the time. But yeah, that's kind of one of the side things I like to talk about in the podcast. And it's probably a theme that weaves through a lot of the interviews that we do and a lot of the content. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say that's something that people should really take the time to think deeply about and find ways of exercising their personal power.
Yeah, a lot of good points there, and I can't remember the quotes, but just to your point about dying sovereign, for me, it's more like in your head, where they can take you. I've mentioned this before in the interview. Like I will laugh on the way to the gulag, so they can physically throw me into a prison or whatever, but they can't force me to believe something that I don't want to believe. So they can physically restrain you, but not spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and so forth. And again, I recommend your Twitter feed. I like your little. You've got short quips that you post that are witty. I got to get working on that, but. How do you gin those up? Do you like think about the sentence you're going to tweet? Because I really enjoy them, and I think you nail it on the head. I'm just curious about those.
I don't know. I like brevity, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, you just hope to be inspired by a good tweet, don't you? Some of them work, some of them don't. There's always trying to figure out what how to analyze the Twitter, what works and what doesn't. And in the end, I just don't know. I don't know what's going to be good. I don't know what's going to be bad. I just, throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks.
you just do it, as was his name, Shia LaBeouf would say. But again, something you've been observing as I have is this woke perversion, right? And I love this guy. I saw you tweet him. I'm constantly sharing of this New York artist Scott Lobido. And he's saying what a lot of us have had on our minds. You just I think shared as did I. He shares this photo in I think somewhere in the U.S. I guess New York, where
I think it's in London actually.
Or was it London?
I think I'm not 100%.
Literally,
but yeah.
3 men completely naked with their genitalia hanging out, and children passing by in front of them. I mean, this is basically like, Sodom and Gomorrah, and we're just seeing more. And more of this stuff all over the place. In the U.S., someone just shared information in a school. The teacher was asking 11-year-olds, where would you like to have sex for the first time? And listed places like hotel, bedroom as good options. And all the kids were appalled and embarrassed. They said, and just, a lot of us listening to this are very familiar with this. I'm just wondering, how far is this going to go before something breaks? Just your thoughts on all of this insanity.
Well, I think this year was the most positive that I've remembered in at least 5 years, is that there's a lot more pushback now. There's more people are less bothered by the names that the enemy is trying to hurl at us. So once that fear is gone, once people are more afraid of the damage that this causes than the damage that the name will cause you, then the more people will push back. And I've been, encouraged by this year's pride that we're seeing, definite green shoots of recovery from our people. It may not seem like that, but for me, that's how I viewed it. And it's kind of tipping points like the photograph in question that does the job, and in that photograph is that he even pixelates out the offensive parts of it. But the one guy who is leaning against the wall, he's got an erection as the child's walking past. And, in a just and healthy society, the real men would deal with that properly. They would deal with that in an instant. You wouldn't allow your children to walk through it. We deal with it in a way that it needs to be dealt with. And it's it's like Satan has been unleashed, and he has conquered the month of June. And the month of June is I think, is traditionally is to do with marriage. I think Juno is the Roman god of marriage, which would be kind of quite ironic, wouldn't it? You know, so they have captured and hijacked the glorious summer month of June, and turned it into this diabolical festival of just outright weirdness. The fact what they're doing is just so weird, and I don't even understand what the objective goal is even from a business point of view. I mean, where are they really going with this? Because that's not what they're not showing us, is that it's like, you know, you go and watch a movie. If you haven't wrote the movie, you don't know where the plot is taking you. But the guy who's wrote the movie, he knows what the end scene is. Right? He knows where it's taking you. But we're just kind of being fed the narrative of various stages, and the ending and the plot points are being withheld from us, right? And it's definitely something like that going on here, because it seems so bizarre why they're doing this blatant destruction of our civilization in such demonic fashion. You know, there's even calls now, isn't there, for Islam to take over, to clean up the society, because they wouldn't allow it to happen in an Islamic world. So is there a problem reaction solution going on here? Is the goal to take us as far as they can in a degenerative, diabolical way, so that the savior steps in and says, we'll clean it up, guys, because you guys aren't having much luck here, are you? And then the people willingly accept the new order, which would act as a purge. Maybe there's something like that going on, but it's been heartwarming to see the pushback. And that's one of the things about Twitter. I know people criticize Elon Musk quite rightly, but at the same time, he's giving me a platform to speak, and he's given other people a platform to speak. And what we found is that these ideologues, because they've had such a free run on the public platforms, and whenever we have pushed back in the past, we've been removed from those platforms. Therefore, their ideas have not been challenged. And because their ideas have not been challenged, they've kind of flourished in this forum where the ridiculous absurdity of them has had no pushback. So they've grown and grown and grown. And now, because all of a sudden we are allowed a voice, we have been speaking out, is that we're seeing these people be absolutely, totally ratioed in almost every thread. Almost every thread on Twitter. And that is the battleground. Twitter is the political battleground. You know, Facebook isn't, and Instagram certainly isn't, but Twitter is the political battleground. And it's been really, really encouraging to see. I sometimes just, you know, go on the threads just for the ratio, just to watch the ratio, get some popcorn and watch it go, because it's almost inevitable that it happens when these people make these absurd ideological quotes that they haven't thought through, they haven't been challenged on. So that's really good for me, and I've been enjoying getting involved in it. And what's interesting, you don't see the ratio coming from the other side. You don't see someone who is opposed to Pride, for instance, then suddenly being piled on from pro-Pride people. It's only the other way at the moment, which means that there is some hope that we will win the culture war. And also, we've had, you know, some interesting decisions from the American Supreme Court, which I found surprising. One was the end of affirmative action, and the other was the decision recently in which a guy said, I think it was a website maker, who was trying to be forced to make LGBT websites. Obviously, you know, some fetish porn that he doesn't want to be forced into making, that the Supreme Court found in his favor. They are massive, massive landmark decisions, because that means that all of a sudden, you know, it's now legal to literally legally push back and say, no, I'm not getting involved in this. So yeah, I think overall it's positive, but we're still riding through the valley in the shadow of death, you know, with this weird cultural phenomenon that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, fun times. And I recently interviewed on my TNT show, TNT Radio, Robert Delahunty, who wrote Politically Incorrect Guide to the Supreme Court. He was 17 years at the DOJ. And then Judge Amul Tharapal I just interviewed him, who wrote a book on Clarence Thomas, one of the justices at the Supreme Court, and himself, and Judge Amul himself may be a future candidate for the Supreme Court. And I like how you put it. That's exactly how I think. We're going back to the whole transgenderism, insanity, LGBTQ plus trans, whatever, to infinity, where they're hiding the plot devices from us. And it's true. It's like, where are they going with this? Where we are now doesn't make any sense. And it's progressively getting worse. And they know something that we don't, even with the
Definitely.
DEI, ESG, corporate social credit stuff with the BUD, all these where they're transizing all of the corporations. So, someone posited that this was one way of attacking Americana, traditional identity, by attacking a lot of these traditional brands, corrupting them, fracturing America. So yeah, a lot of craziness is going on, and something we often talk about in independent media. Yeah, I've been to the Greater Reset with Derek Bros. I go to different other conferences, and I guess the question is, in this dystopian hellscape, as you put it, how do we stay as free as possible? I like the maxim one of my guests, Ricardo Bossi, told me on the program 3 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt's, do what you can with what you got and where you are. And I'm just in a balanced place. Try to decentralize as much as possible. Work locally, I think, more than digitally, and just stay sane. I still get emails from people like daily who are like, check out this video about the 5G mRNA, this, that. I'm like, I can't. Sorry, I'm gonna go, walk around in the sun. I'm done with that, And it's just like, I know, I'm not gonna get injected. I don't need to investigate. Spend 20 hours a day investigating what's in the shot. No. I know it's bad, and so it's just like people. You got to get more balanced, and so this whole idea of parallel society and structures, and so just any of your thoughts as to the way forward.
Well, I love that quote that you give. That was a great quote. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Just bear with me a second. I've just lost your screen. There we are. Got it back. Sorry, close tab. Yeah, I lost the Chrome. Sorry, it's only on Chrome, this, isn't it? Okay, yeah, that quote is perfect. It's like, you can only do what you can do, right? You can only do what's within your resources, within your control. And if you can't control it, then I don't let it bother me too much. There's something definitely going on above my head. There's something definitely going on in our skies in Europe. I don't know what that is, but it's undeniable that, there is some organization with the airplanes above my head, right? I don't know what that is. I'll never be able to get to the bottom of it. I can't control it. So I don't let it get to me. I don't let it bother me, because there's nothing I can do about it. So all I can do is what I can do personally to improve my life, my friends, and my family, and anybody else that, wants to be part of Eyes Wide Open. And that's kind of what we do on the podcast, is that because everyone's problem and everyone's situation is different, it's difficult to give a definitive prescription of how to be free, right? So it's all about, it's like a pick and mix. You use what you need for your particular scenario. So what I'm trying to do on the podcast, I have a very eclectic taste. I'm not niche. I've never been niche. I just like lots of things. Whatever turns me on, I'm into it, right? And I want to share that with you, with my audience and stuff. So I have an interest in lots of things. So I like bringing on lots of different diverse guests that all have some angle on how to break free of the system. And some people are super specific, super smart, and they're able to go, this is what I want to share with you. And other people are more generalists like myself. So I want to be able to create a podcast with, a ton of content that people can go and access and then build their own framework from the solutions that we offer. Whether that's health solutions with people like Darko Velchak, who shows you how to, clean and cleanse the system on a quantum level, or whether you want to get residency in a different country to keep your property divided so that the state and the Great Reset can't snatch it all from you. Or whether it's speaking to people like Lisa Tanner who've got some mortgage solutions. We speak to people like that as well. So that's what I try to focus on, is picking up a multitude of different tools and techniques that we can all use to extricate ourselves from this system. Decentralization, of course, is hugely important. You know, you've got to unplug yourself from the system. But we talked about this in the last podcast. By a weird coincidence, we talked about some of the PT stuff, Perpetual Traveler and Andrew Henderson and Simon Black. And then the following week, I went to visit a friend of mine and we were chatting and he went, "Oh, I've got something for you, which is this," right? I don't know whether it's back to front there. It's called, The Passport Report by W.G. Hill, right? And W.G. Hill is the guy who first invented Perpetual Traveler, PT. Right? And a lot of the modern guys took the ideas from, this is basically how to get a second passport. This was written in 1995. Right? Amazing book. Right? There's a whole series of these. You can get them on Amazon quite cheap, actually. So yeah, for me personally, is that one, you need to understand the law. If you're in a common law jurisdiction, you need to understand the basics. You don't need much more than the basics, but you need to understand your fundamental rights and how they're expressed through the law, specifically the common law. That's one of the first, most important steps you can take, because once you understand your rights, you know when the state is giving you the illusion of authority, when they're trying to impose their authority on you without actually having the authority at law. And once you understand that, you become more confident in pushing back against these authority figures, which they really don't like, right? But if you're confident and aware of what your rights are and you're able to express them, you can find that you have magical powers, like a Jedi, like Obi-Wan Kenobi. These aren't the droids you're looking for. And it's so prophetic. You can speak to some of these state agents with, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And they go, okay. And they'll be gone and they'll melt off into the background. And I've done it numerous times over the years. So that's one of the most important things, is knowing what your national rights are. Yeah, your national rights are really, really important. Where we have the benefits of a common law jurisdiction, the same as you in America. In Europe, it's different. It's the Roman civil law, which definitely doesn't have as many of your rights protected. And it's a bit more of a challenge there. I couldn't really advise on that. But so yeah, that's one of the first things. And then it's about, how do you protect your property? And your property is not just your, movable property like your phone, but it's obviously your house and your intellectual property, and it's your body. How do you protect your body, which is the first property that you own? And that's where things like internationalism comes in which you spread your assets around so that, they're not vulnerable to attack from, the country that you reside in, whether that's second passport, whether that's residency, different bank accounts, whatever. You have to make sure that the banks that are defunding Nigel Farage find it more difficult to do that to you. And there are other little tricks and techniques that you can do. Nigel Farage should obviously change his name to something less obvious as Nigel Farage, and maybe it'd slip through the net of the banks. So yeah, that's on a physical level. And then on a spiritual level, like we talked about, it's sovereignty. It's knowing who you are and knowing what you're about and knowing your power. And once you do that, you're free then forever. There is no enslaving you at that moment. It doesn't matter what physical bondage they put on you. You're free internally and spiritually, and that's ultimately what they don't want you to become, because at that moment you'll never ever be captured by their system, and that's the best way to be free.
I think that would be a great title for this podcast. These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, it really works. Honestly, I've done it many times.
But I get what you're saying. And, when I was interviewing last week, the judge, one of the listeners in TNT sent an email saying, why do I need to know all this? And I think COVID was the perfect example. Even here in Mexico, I went out and bought Mexican constitutions because I never really, read them. And I'm a Mexican citizen. And I'm like, what they're doing is unconstitutional. You've got the governor talking about passport vaccine checkpoints to enter or exit the state, or mandating vaccines. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's illegal, but we're considering altering the state constitution to make it legal, or the masks and stuff. And it's like, it's you just outlined it perfectly. If you know your rights, you know where they're overstepping theirs, and you can push back where the government is acting illegally. Then you can say no, because a lot of people don't know, and they'll just go with the crowd. The sheep, the herd goes over the hill. You want to go over the hill with the the mass of pigs, like going back to the New Testament when Jesus and the legion and the demons sent them into the pigs. They fell off the cliff.
Yeah, we are legion. Yeah,
yeah. But and yeah, I also like how you mentioned that's what I do here, where you get guests where each comes from a different angle. You might not agree with everything, but all of my guests have one piece of the puzzle that I never entertained before, never heard, and I'm like, wow, that's mad. I'm putting that in my bag of tricks, my library of knowledge. So I've just added something where I can disagree with them on other things, but like, oh, look at this piece, and you get a bigger picture.
What's the great privilege of being a podcast host of this type of content, isn't it? We get to speak to them directly, and get to pocket all the gems.
yeah, all the gems. And any final thought for us before you leave us?
Yeah, just people to remain positive. Don't let the bastards get you down, right? And don't let the diabolical hellscape be the only future that you can envisage. Think about the utopia that we can build together. And if anyone wants to come on with me on that journey, you can find me over on my website, which is laurenceeaseman.com.
I'll include the link in the link is in the description of this podcast. And yeah, even in dystopia, we can make our own little utopia. We'll keep up the great work, and thank you for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thanks for the invite. Great to chat to you. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. And after the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.